Welcome to Oddball. Oddball is presented by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you will learn more about DraftKings Pick 6 and all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we have a very exciting episode today. Our guest is Yahoo Sports reporter Tom Haberstroh. His latest article dropped today, and it reveals Michael Jordan's Defensive Player of the Year season likely included some home-cooked stats.
Yeah, home-cooked is putting it lightly, as Tom is going to talk about in this interview. It's a lot of manipulation going on there. And, of course, Michael Jordan's Depoy Award is one of the big arguments people make for him over LeBron in the GOAT debate. So how does that change things?
Let's hear from Tom.
There's no real gentle way to put this. There seems to have been some fudging of the numbers and Michael Jordan's statistics, particularly on the defensive side, that may have played a huge role in him winning Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, I mean, I've been working on this story for months now because I had talked to a statistician who worked in the NBA for a team in the late 90s who said, yeah, there's home-cooked stats in the NBA, paraphrasing. And that's part of working for the team, is that when a guy has an assist or kind of a borderline assist, you give it to him if he's your guy. And if he has was that a steal by the star player or the bench guy, you give it to the star player. And that got me thinking, I wonder how prevalent this was in NBA history. And so my mind immediately went to, if blocks and steals are more subjective than we thought, if that was more of a beauty is in the eye of the beholder, I was going to say, well, what Defensive Player of the Year award would we have to look at and just reevaluate and see if there's any sort of home bias there? Turns out the one Defensive Player of the Year award that had the largest disparity between home blocks and steals and road blocks and steals was one Michael Jordan in 1988 when he won not just Defensive Player of the Year, but also the scoring title. He is the only player in NBA history to win both the scoring title and Defensive Player of the Year in the same year. And so I was like, my mind was blown because you saw how important that was, Amin, in the entire GOAT conversation that we have with LeBron James, Kareem, Magic. The one thing Michael Jordan had over those guys is it's not just the 6-0 record. That's probably number one what people go to. But right up there is how many Defensive Player of the Year awards did Kareem have or LeBron have or Magic have? That's right, 0. You know what Michael Jordan has? He's got the 88 Defensive Player of the Year. And to see that there was this large gap between road steals and home steals, I had to get into this story and dive down deeper, and it only began there. Once I saw the stats that were crazy, the story only began there.
So, Tom, you start looking into this. Was any part of you skeptical? Were you like, no, maybe MJ, the greatest of all time, so many people say, which is now the crazy part of this is that this is actually calling into question all of those arguments that sports media has been having since LeBron James certainly entered the league. Was any part of you like, no, there is a chance these could stand even with this crazy discrepancy?
Yeah, so let me just give you the stats here, Charlotte.
Yeah.
Michael Jordan at home in 1988, he's 25 years old, okay? He had at home in Chicago an average of 4.0 steals and 2.1 blocks, okay? He's a guard. Averaging 2 blocks a game at home is outrageous. And then 4 steals. A 3-steal game is a bad night at home, according to this, right? When he was on the road, his steal rate went from 4 a game to 2.1. It got sliced in half, okay? Then the blocks went from 2.1 to 1.2. So his home stats were 80%, 82% to be precise, 82% higher at home than on the road. Now, you might say to yourself, well, everybody plays better at home. Not to this extent. You look at every Defensive Player of the Year award winner since the last 40, 50 years. Michael Jordan's 82% bump on the at home compared to the road is the largest for any Defensive Player of the Year award winner, and the second place guy's at 59%. Okay, so he was at 82%. No one else was above 60%. And so I was like, what's going on here? I have to go watch the film. And I was like, it might be that he's a little bit better at home, but Tom, not this degree. I mean,
well, let me ask you. I'm like, like you said, man, steals and blocks are subjective. Like, hey, I deflect the ball and Charlotte picks it up. A scorekeeper in many arenas has a choice whether I'm the reason the steal happened or because Charlotte got the possession, it could be her steal. So couldn't it just be all explained by stuff like that?
I would hope that was the case, but it wasn't, because when you look at the games that he was actually playing in, he played in all 82 in that season, but when you look at the actual games, you see something's off. Just by looking at the box score, I'll give you an example. There's a game in which the Atlanta Hawks had 10 turnovers and the Bulls had 10 steals. Okay, what does this mean? 10 turnovers and 10 steals means there are no dead ball turnovers. Because if you have 10 steals on 10 opponent turnovers, that means there's 10 live ball steals, live ball opportunities for steals to be had. So this means that in that 48-minute game, there was no travels, there were no 24-second violations, there were no out-of-bounds plays. A guy steps out of bounds or passes it out of bounds. So immediately when I see this game, I'm like, how is this possible? Well, it's possible because there were some extra steals being given out. And how do I know this? Because I watched the film and there was only 3 live ball steals opportunities in that game. There were 7 dead ball turnovers in the game. There was 5 offensive fouls and out of bounds play here, out of bounds play there. And so there was all these extra steals happening in the game, and yet there were only 3 actual steal opportunities. So it wasn't just about, hey, that's a 50-50 call, I'm giving it to Michael. There were actual extra steals being given out when there wasn't a steal opportunity or a live ball turnover to be had.
Tom, how did you find this film? That's something that, in reading the article, I found that absolutely fascinating.
So if you go to Google right now or Twitter or YouTube and look up like full games of 1988 Jordan Bulls, you're not going to find any. They don't exist. But you know what does exist? European NBA superfans. Okay?
What?
These people are the key to this story, because here in America, you could watch Jordan Bulls games in the 90s because they were on. They were on national TV all the time. In Europe, they had to wait, and every time the game was on, maybe once a month, people at home would literally tape them and put them on VHS tapes. And so there's all these fans in Europe that would tape old games in the 80s and 90s and just have them on VHS. And they traded them amongst each other. And so I saw a game of clips from Nick Van Exel. Nick Van Exel in 97, I want to say. He had a 23 assist game. And this guy in Latvia, his name is Rainis Latsis. His YouTube handle is Lamar Matic because he's a fan of Lamar Modem and Illmatic from Nas. So he smashed them together and he created that YouTube channel. And he's from Latvia, right? And the game film was hard to come by. Nick Van Exel's 23 assist game. Well, it turns out this was scored by the same stat keeper that admitted to fudging the stats.
Wait, the same guy who you guys interviewed on Pablo Torre Finds Out, Alex Rucker. This is the same Alex Rucker who was the VP of basketball ops with the Sixers. Is the same guy who scored the 23 assist game?
Same guy. Boom. Mind blown. Pick up your jaw off the floor. So when Pablo and I worked on this story, I found out the name of the stat keeper who admitted publicly, anonymously, online that he had fudged the stats back in the late 90s for the Grizzlies. And I got a hold of Alex and he confirmed it. But it put me on to this YouTube channel, which is like, where did you get this film? Oh, he's like, I've got film on 80s games, 90s games. What do you need? And I was like, I need more Michael Jordan tapes from the 88 season. Do you have them? And he's like, honestly, I don't, but I can go find them. So he comes back with 5 tapes from that 88 season in which Michael Jordan had a lot of steals and a lot of blocks. And we independently watched those games. And when we compared our notes, charted every single play, looking for steals and steal opportunities on live ball turnovers. And we determined that in those games, 6 games, one of them was on YouTube, which you can watch right now. It's an amazing game. Boston, Larry Bird, Kevin McHale. Larry Bird has a black eye in the game. It's amazing. So there's 6 games. Michael Jordan in the box score in those 6 games was he had 28 steals. Mm-hmm. We watched the game and we found 12.
Wow.
12. So are you just like flipping out as you are discovering this?
So I'm like, what is going on here? Am I seeing things? What am I missing here? But when we compared the live ball turnovers to the actual film, we realized that there were steals being given out. Alex Rucker said assists were given out like candy back in the day. I think what was happening here, Charlotte, was a couple things. One, on those 50-50 calls, Michael Jordan was getting the benefit of the doubt. Mike Brown, not the coach of the Sacramento Kings, but the center for the Chicago Bulls, he would have this amazing in-transition deflection on a pass. And then Michael, it would fall in his lap, and Mike would get the steal. But the other way wouldn't work, where if Michael was making that amazing play and Mike Brown was falling into his lap, Mike Brown wouldn't get the steal. It was actually Michael Jordan getting the steal. So there was that 50-50 benefit of the doubt, star treatment. But there's other stuff going on where Michael, we saw, when he had these excess steals, like a lot more steals than what we saw, there were instances where he would deflect the ball out of bounds, and then the Pistons, let's say, would get the ball back. So Joe Dumars makes a pass. Michael Jordan deflects it, goes out of bounds. The Pistons get the ball back. They score later. Those sort of things we flagged to say, like, hey, later we'll look at the box score and see all these excess steals. Maybe those are being considered steals. And sure enough, they were. Other times, like, let's say Joe Dumars, for example, would lose the ball. Michael would make an attempt to go steal it, and then Joe Dumars got the ball again. There was no change of possession, but just because Michael was involved on a Joe Dumars kind of fumbling of the ball, we suspected that was kind of like, you know what, we'll give him a steal there. And so there was that. And then also, when a guy would take a shot with Michael Jordan contesting it, and there was a foul called, we would see that Michael Jordan would have excess blocks in the box score after the foul call was made. It seemed as if Michael Jordan was getting credited for a block on a foul call when he shouldn't have. But when Horace Grant did the same thing, there was no blocks in the box score for Horace Grant. So it did seem, again, in these 6 games, that there was selective benefit of the doubt given to Michael Jordan on 50-50 calls, but also misapplied rules giving him what seemed to be extra blocks and extra steals.
All right, look, let's take a break here. When we get back, we're going to talk to Tom about who is the guy behind this, because these things don't happen in a vacuum. There's someone responsible for this. And Tom, you know the name of the guy who's responsible, correct?
Yes.
All right, we'll tell you the name when we come back right here on Oddball.
We'll be back with more from our interview with Tom after the break. Welcome back. Here is more from our interview with Tom Haberstroh about Michael Jordan's 1988 season.
When we left off, Tom, I said, there's someone behind this, someone responsible for this, and you actually have the name of the statistician who's responsible for this. Who is he, and what's his deal?
I couldn't believe it, but this is like a legendary stat keeper. He is the stat keeper of stat keepers. He has worked for the Chicago Bulls for their inaugural season back in the 60s, okay? He retired last year.
Wow.
So
Oh my
This is
God.
a guy who had worked for the Bulls for over 50 years, the longest tenured stat keeper that I could come up with across sports. His name is Bob Rosenberg, and he goes by Rosie. And he was there for Jerry Sloan when he played for the Bulls, and he was there for Ayo Dosunmu, this past year. He spanned 5 decades, 6 decades for the Chicago Bulls, and he's kind of a legend, right? And so I couldn't believe that, like, not only is there a stat keeper who is behind or appeared to be behind some fudgery with Michael Jordan's stats, but he's also one of the most highly acclaimed scorekeepers in the game, kind of a god amongst, he's a very familiar face. If you go to Bulls games, you might see him and he might say hello because he's been there for, since your grandkids have been around. So Bob Rosenberg was working as the scorekeeper, the head scorekeeper, and it was kind of amazing to go through the press clippings and search his name, because turns out he has been accused of home cook stats before. And it wasn't about Michael Jordan. It was about Dennis Rodman and his tip rebounds. When Dennis Rodman had a big disparity in home and road rebounds, there was an executive who complained to Sports Illustrated saying, hey, there's something fishy going on here with Rodman's stats. And there was another case where...
So I remember this, by the way. This was, so for the viewing audience, this would be shot goes up, ball caroms off the rim, and Rodman, in order to get into a better position to grab it over here, would tip it to himself. But sometimes he'd tip it 1, 2, 3 times before eventually ending up with possession. Most people would call those control tips, and unless it's tipped towards someone, those are just really tips. The Bulls were being accused of counting those as each individual rebounds.
Right.
Oh, wow.
And like maybe Rodman like tips it out, and then another guy gets the rebound, and he gets the credit for the tip. But like, basically, this wasn't the first time that Rosenberg was accused of stat keeping or cooking the stats. The second time was Bob Rosenberg himself would tell the story that a local legendary sports writer would introduce Bob Rosenberg as the guy who made Guy Rogers famous. Guy Rogers, you're like, who's that? That's the guy in his lone full season with the Chicago Bulls, led the NBA in assists per game, beating out Oscar Robertson, won the assist title, and he had a huge disparity, a huge gap between his home assists and his road assists.
Shocker.
And the legendary sports writer would introduce Bob Rosenberg as, hey, this is the guy who made him famous. So, and Bob Rosenberg divulged that story to the Chicago Tribune. So this wasn't like an accusation from another executive. This is Bob Rosenberg admitting that people think that he cooks the books. And it's there's this other thing. He would help Michael in the middle of games know how close he is to records and know how close he is to triple doubles by motioning how many rebounds he needs. He would hold up 2 fingers, or he'd hold up an assist. And you know how I know this? Because Bob Rosenberg admitted to it. In an article. He said in the 88 All-Star game, Michael Jordan was mad after the game because he was 2 points away from Wilt Chamberlain's All-Star scoring record of 42 points. And Michael Jordan was like so mad at Bob and was like, why didn't you tell me I was 2 points away from the record? And Bob's like, I held up 2 fingers at the score table the entire fourth quarter. What do you think I was doing? By the way, you like those balloons?
Yeah.
So he would motion, he would gesture to Michael in the middle of games to let him know, hey man, you're really close to breaking that record. And Michael Jordan, it was such a thing that he would get mad at the scorekeeper for not gesturing him even when he was.
So, Tom, we have to go big picture here, because all of this evidence starts to add up to be pretty compelling. What does this do? I mean, to me, you, Amin and Tom, you both have been in the stats game, the basketball world, deep in it for so long. To me, more of a generalist and like the narrative arc of things, stats to me have been like, okay, this is true, this is true, this is true. It's like it's sort of holy, right? Because that's what can make up the basis of so many of these arguments about who's the greatest. It feels like this is like pulling the rug out from everything, or pulling the curtains back on the Wizard of Oz, or like finding out that this is sort of huge. Like
Babe Ruth wasn't facing the best competition, wasn't facing the Negro leagues. Like, this is one of those things where the NBA didn't really have that. I guess you could say the ABA is the equivalent, but like, this is a story not just about Michael Jordan, but also that era. I don't think people realize that stat keepers are employed by the team, not the league, right? So there's a conflict of interest right there from the beginning that, okay, this was happening with Michael Jordan, that there would be these home road disparities, but also like you said, it lasts forever. Once you win Defensive Player of the Year award, you don't just win the award, but you probably stay on the all defensive teams a lot more than you should have, because it almost has this like halo effect, right? Mm-hmm. And then of course, LeBron James has said on the record, like I think it was on his show recently, he's like, the one thing I haven't done in my career is win Defensive Player of the Year. And he's like, it annoys me to this day because Marc Gasol won it, but he was second team all defense. He talked about this. This stuff matters because, look, I always assumed it was accurate. I assumed it was true.
Right.
Stats seem objective, but then we learn that today we have so many safeguards in place to verify the accuracy of statistics. And now that I'm researching the story, I realize those safeguards, for technological reasons, just weren't there. They didn't exist. So something like this was ripe to happen, and it just so happened to be the most consequential Defensive Player of the Year award, I think, in the history of the NBA.
Tom, one of the most interesting things in your article is you would think something like this would be a state secret, right? Or at the very least, we would say, to use your Wizard of Oz comp, Charlotte, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, right?
Right.
But the NBA's own official YouTube account kind of like pull back the curtain and say, hey guys, take a look at this.
Yeah, there was an amazing find, because like you want to go look at the old Michael Jordan games where he had an amazing amount of steals, 6 steals, 7 steals, and you find that there is one on the official NBA YouTube channel. Michael Jordan gets 10 steals, record-breaking 10 steals game. And you're like, oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to watch all these amazing steals, all 10 of them. You watch the film, and the entire clip, there's only 6 steals.
This is their account saying, watch all 10 of these steals. Here's the video. And you sit and you actually watch the video count. There are only 6 steals in the video.
Only 6 steals in the video. And there's fluff in there. It's like you're clicking on a video to watch Michael Jordan's record-setting 10 steals that he had in January of that season. At home, by the way. And you watch and you're like, why is there a jump shot from Michael Jordan here? Why is there a great pass from Michael Jordan? There was like fluff. There was filler in between the steals. I don't know why, but it was like I ordered 10 chicken wings and I'm only getting 6. You know, I think you would notice as a viewer. So what's interesting, Amin, is the comments section was all like, this is why he's the GOAT. Like his steals, like he was a great defensive player. This is why he's better than LeBron. And then there would be a couple people in the chat being like, wait a minute, I only saw 6 steals. Where are the rest of them? And that's when my brain was like, wait a minute. What if whoever was cutting that video realized there's not 10 steals? We got to throw some throw some shots in here to
some
throw off the audience,
there.
But there were some people who figured it out.
Some napkins, some extra straws, whatever gets us there. It's an incredible story, Tom, and I think, like you and Charlotte both said, it hammers home to the very heart of how we think about this game and how we think about certain people, because the next thing you think about once you get past, wow, Michael Jordan didn't have all those steals, is, well, then what other stats have they lied to us about, right? What other stats have been trumped up and stretched and maybe kind of beyond the realm of 50-50 towards outright blatant, that's fabricated, like the 4 steals that Michael Jordan didn't have in that game.
All right, thanks a lot to Tom Haberstroh for joining us. Remember, you can catch his work on Yahoo Sports and also on his Substack, The Finder. Also, he's a TV analyst for the Portland Trail Blazers.
Oh, look at that. Thank you to Tom. Fascinating stuff. Check the article out. And that's all for Oddball. We'll see you tomorrow.